Welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to discuss something that is often a gray area for many people. An idea that there is something beyond this world. We're fascinated by the idea of aliens. We're fascinated by the idea of life on other planets. We're fascinated by what else might be out there in the universe. And for most religions, what is out there is some concept of heaven. And that heaven being a place where people go if they believe, if they deserve, if they are good. I'm not sure all those things. And also if they have the right credentials, I guess, like you believe in a certain savior, you believe in a certain messenger, you are part of a particular organization, a church, or whatever else it might be. So that's been the traditional path of the Abrahamic religions. And then you come to Vedanta and Advaita, which are basically the root teachings that most people have now incorporated in the Western world under spirituality. And there the belief is that we come from the light. And that when we are free from this world, then we'll go back to the light. Whenever and however that happens, most people on the spiritual path don't seem to talk about it. They seem to be more interested in being in the body, being in their emotions, being in all kinds of other things in nature, but there's not much talk about how do you, why we're here, what this world is all about, and what do we do to get out of here. So that discussion doesn't seem to be a commonplace thing amongst the spiritual communities. But if you go back to the more traditional spiritual communities, such as I was mentioning earlier, the Vedanta and Advaita, and even Buddhism for that matter, there is always some concept of liberation, moksha, nirvana. What that means really is merging into the light, becoming one with source or the universe or something like that. And then there is the concept of bhakti. In bhakti or devotional yoga, the talk is about the beloved, Krishna, God as beautiful, as playful, as fun-loving, and living in a place called Goloka, Goloka Vrindavan. And the idea is that he comes here along with his beloved, Radha, and enacts pastimes to show us what it's like to be with God, and then returns from this world and gives us the tools with which we can also come back home. The fact of the matter is we all want a home. We want to find a beautiful place where we can feel safe, where we feel loved. We are able to enjoy our life, and for most of us, we work hard all our life to have such a home. Home sweet home, we call it. And this is it's a dream of a place that is filled with laughter and sweet memories. A few of us attain this. And for a lot of people in modern times, it's become a bit of a pipe dream. Many find themselves in the end of their life, instead of being surrounded by loved ones, being in a nursing home or being in a hospital or some kind of care facility or old age home. And as a result of which, we're not really in that place. Besides, is this really home? I mean, if we have to leave here, then how is it home? If there is a home that we dream of in our hearts, that is a home that we will inhabit forever. But this home of this world will only be temporary. This body will only be temporary. This family will only be of this life. What next? What then? What then? What then? So if we keep asking the questions, we have to consider another possibility. If there is life beyond death, yes, we may come back to this world as in reincarnation, but if we can get out of the cycle of reincarnation, or the wheel of samsara as they call it in Buddhism, and the cycle of birth and death as they call it in Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma, then where do we go? There is one option, the light. There is other option, the place of Radha and Krishna, where we can engage in lila and pastimes. Which is better? Which would you rather have? Would you have a place where you've merged in the light, You have lost your individuality and there is nothing to be done. You're just there. Is that appealing to you? Or would you rather see yourself in a place like Goloka with Radha and Krishna, engaged in beautiful pastimes with a spiritual form that you can design as your own choosing, in a place that you can have pastimes and fun and enjoy singing and dancing and playing and having a wonderful time, no longer being stressed by the ways of this world, no longer finding yourself struggling for existence, trying to survive, a place where you no longer get old and sick and die. Is it another pipe dream? Or is it a reality? Let's find out through great sages and wise people who've been exploring this concept for thousands of years, people who've had deep realizations and meditations, and who've actually seen what happens at the other end of this spectrum. All right, so I thought today we will really try to understand this through the life of King Prithu and Archie. Now, last two episodes, we've been talking about the two of them, and you might remember. And we've been also talking about another set of characters that were there a few episodes back. They were called the four Kumaras. They looked like young boys. They would walk around without anything. They were highly, highly, highly evolved beings. And their visit to the Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual world, where they met with Jai and Vijay. So if you haven't heard that, please go back to some of the earlier episodes where we talked about this. The four Kumaras are the sons of Brahma. And they've eternally, as young boys, now they come to meet with King Prithu. And they're going to have this wonderful dialogue. And we're going to learn from them something about the spiritual world and about what lies ahead for us, or what's possible at least. So with that, let's get started. Now, as I was saying, the king had returned home to his palace, and this is in the earlier episode. He had had this wonderful Ashwamedha sacrifice, and now when he was back, the four Kumaras appeared. They were, as I said, the sons of Brahma, and they are known to be the masters of mystic power. And they suddenly descended from the sky. Now, clearly the yogis at that time, and at all times actually, according to the Vedas, were able to travel anywhere they wanted without the use of any spaceship, without the use of any kind of vehicle. They were able to just travel. So at this point, when the four Kumaras appeared, the king and all his officers got up hastily to receive them. The king seated them on his throne and worshipped them with great respect. He washed their feet and then sprinkled the water on his head. This may seem like a very strange tradition for you, but this was the way that great saintly people were honored and respected when they came to the home of a householder. People were given this kind of respect because the saintly persons were considered the highest people in society, greater than even the kings. And so even the king would get off his throne, place them on his throne, and honor and worship them. In fact, wash their feet with his own hands, not through servants, with his own hands, and place that water on his head. The four sages were older than Shiva. That means they were millions of years old. They were not deathless beings, but very ancient beings. But they appeared as young boys, and their aura appeared like a blazing fire. The king, Prithu, spoke, "My dear great sages, auspiciousness personified, it is very difficult for even the mystic yogis to see you. Indeed, you are very rarely seen. I do not know what kind of pious activity I performed for you to grace me by appearing before me. Now, as a comment here, I want to say that the meeting with a highly evolved being is actually the most auspicious event that can occur in a person's life. We often think that the most auspicious thing might be if we had a lottery, or we got a great job, or we met somebody wonderful. But the most auspicious thing that can actually happen to us is when we meet with a highly evolved being. Why is that? Because such beings have the ability to open our eyes, to show us things that we could not understand before, to clarify, to cleanse the heart, to purify the consciousness, and to awaken us. And they do this by their very presence. Their presence is so energizing. They says here that the aura of these four young, who appeared like young boys, the four Kumaras, appeared like a blazing fire. So it was that powerful and palpable, their aura. The Bhagavatam continues, where the king actually continues saying, a person who is not very rich and is attached to family life becomes highly glorified when saintly persons are present in his home. When the family members are engaged in offering the exalted visitors water, a sitting place, and food, everything in that home is also glorified. On the contrary, even though full of all opulence and material prosperity, any householder's home where the devotees of God are never allowed to come in is considered to be a tree in which venomous serpents live. Now, he's not saying that such people are evil, let's be clear. He's not saying that they're bad. But this is a place where if you are not open to those who are devoted to God in some way, then what happens is you're living in a place that is surrounded by darkness, whether you see it or not. You may light it up with tons of lights, and you may have tremendous opulence, and you may live in a big house, and you may have big windows in that house, but there is darkness there, a deep darkness. And that he refers to as the venomous snakes of materialistic desire and opulence. Now, it's not, again, try to understand this, it is not matter that is good or bad. It is the addiction to it. It is the thinking that this is all there is to life. That. Why is it bad? Because it traps us into our body, into this world, and into the cycle of birth and death. And because of that, because it traps us, he refers to it as venomous snakes. You see, that kind of thinking, that kind of consciousness. King Prithu continued, there is no need to ask about your good and bad fortune, he tells them, because you are always absorbed in spiritual bliss. The mental concoction of the auspicious and inauspicious does not exist in you. So this is one of the signs of a highly evolved being, is that the dualistic ideas that we have of good and bad, something favorable and unfavorable, something that you like and something that you dislike, does not exist with them. Those are things of duality. Those are things of this world. And the way of this world is duality. There is light, night, and there is day. There is good and there is bad. There is right and there is wrong. But those who have become highly evolved, the symptom of such a person is that they are free from this dualistic notion and they live in a plane of non-duality. What does that mean? That means that for them, there is neither right nor wrong, good nor bad, neither evil nor whatever the opposite would be, saintly. There are no such things. These concepts do not exist. These are mentally concocted ideas. Mentally concocted because that's what the mind does. The mind divides everything into binary codes of positive and negative. Positive, negative. And therefore it is the closest thing to our computers, which work also in binary code. You see, we've designed computers right around the way our mind works. King Prithu continued, "You are the best friends for persons who are blazing in the fire of material existence. The Supreme Being is always anxious to elevate the living entities, and for their benefit he travels all over the world in the form of self-realized persons like you who show us how we can achieve the ultimate goal of life." Try and get this point. Self-realized beings go everywhere with no concern for their own personal welfare and well-being, just to achieve, to give others, to share with others what they have learned, what they have understood about the ultimate goal of life. So ask yourself, what is your goal of life? Most of us have goals, and everyone encourages us to have goals. And they tell us it's very important to have goals. But what is the ultimate goal? If you have a goal to have a good career, to make a lot of money, to have a house, to find a wonderful partner, all these are good. There's nothing wrong in it. You need that for this world. But you're only here in this world for a short while. That short while might be 50 years, 80 years, whatever it is, depending on how old you are now and how much life remains. Actually, nobody knows. You could be gone tomorrow. What is the ultimate goal of life? What is the goal of existence? What is the point of existence? Why are we here? And why do we have to die? And if there is an end to life, then what is your goal beyond life? Have you thought of it? So he says that highly evolved beings travel the world to show us how we can achieve the ultimate, firstly to identify the ultimate goal of life, and then to achieve the ultimate goal of life. So let's find out from this further, what is that ultimate goal of life? Now, one of the Kumars, the eldest of them, his name is Sanat Kumar. He said, "My dear King Prithu, thank you for your wonderful questions, which are beneficial for all living entities." So keep this in mind. Your questions are beneficial for all living entities. That is why I encourage you, as he's saying here, please ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. There is no such thing as an ignorant question. All questions are good. Why? Because it may seem simple to you, it may seem basic, but for someone else, they never even thought of it. It would open their mind, it would open their eyes. So always be alert to any question that might come, even if it's a question that someone else might ask, even if it's not necessarily your question. So listen carefully, and then on the chat or the comments, depending on where you're watching this, feel free to write and ask, because I will answer. Sanat Kumar continues. He says, "You are always thinking of the welfare of others, although you know everything. When there is a congregation of devotees meaning people who are devoted to God, their discussions, questions, and answers are beneficial for everyone's real happiness. The ultimate goal for the welfare of human society," and here it is detachment from the bodily concept of life and increased and steadfast attachment to the lotus feet of the Supreme Godhead. Thus one may cleanse materialistic desires from the core of the heart. All right, let me unpack that for you. The ultimate goal for the welfare of human society is detachment from the bodily concept of life. What does this mean? Think about it a bit. The bodily concept of life refers to thinking that this body is all there is, that this world is all that is. And therefore, everything we do in this world is for this body. We need to clothe this body, we house this body, we feed this body. We try to make sure it's safe. We have hospitals to make sure it's healthy. We have all kinds of arrangements for this body, to massage it, for it to dance, for it to enjoy, for it to drink, for it to be merry, for it to have all kinds of pleasures and sexuality, and you name it. We have so much arrangement for this body. And then we have so much arrangement for this mind also, right? There were libraries in the past, and now we have the internet, and all information is available to us. That is also part of the bodily concept of life. The mind and body are spoken of here as one. But what is beyond this? Whose body is it? We don't stop to ask that. We say, oh no, this is me. Oh really? Whose body is this? You have a body. You have a mind. Who are you? Have you met yourself? Do you know who you are? Right? So the beginning of detaching from the bodily concept of life is to get to this awareness that I am something other than this body and mind. That there is something in me that entered this body, made it come alive, and will leave this body at the time of death, and the body will just drop dead. The Bhagavad Gita says that the soul leaves an old and useless body, one that is no longer functional for whatever reason, and goes to another body at the time of death. And that the self-realized person is not bewildered by such a change. Because the self-realized person sees the self, sees the real you, sees the soul. The soul is the real me. For most people who've met me, they've met this body. They haven't met me. Only someone who has paused and been quiet and gone into their soul can recognize my soul. And that's how it works. People want to have a soulmate. But you can't have a soulmate unless you've quieted your mind and experienced your own soul. And then you can be in that same silence with another being and connect with their soul. That's how it works, right? So that awareness that there is more than all of this is what he's talking about. Well, so if you detach from this, then what do you attach to? Because it is so natural to be attached. We cannot give up attachment. Even the person who gives up the world and lives in a monastery now becomes attached to that monastery, becomes attached to that robe, becomes attached to those beads, becomes attached to their meditation. They're still attached. They're attached to getting up at a certain time. There's always going to be attachment. So he says, if there's going to be attachment, why not attach yourself to the highest frequency of all, the highest being of all? The spiritual being known as the Supreme Being or the Supreme Godhead. We use the term Godhead to mean that there are many devas in Hinduism, there are many demigods, all of who control various aspects of the material world. But beyond all of them is the Supreme Godhead known as Vishnu, and beyond Vishnu, Krishna. So, again, let's go back over this. The supreme goal for the welfare of human society is A, to detach from the bodily concept and then to become attached to the Supreme Being, because it is natural to be attached somewhere. You have to place your attachment on something. So why not place it on God? Thus one may cleanse material or lusty desires from the core of the heart. So this is the process of cleansing the heart. At that time, the four Kumaras, the sons of Brahma, the masters of mystic power, suddenly... I'm repeating this. Okay. King Prithu... What in the world is going on? Right. One should mold his life in such a way that he cannot live in peace without drinking the nectar of the glorification of the Supreme Godhead, Hari. Hari is another name for Vishnu, and Vishnu is another name for Krishna. So one should mold his life in such a way that one cannot live in peace without drinking the nectar of the glorification of the Supreme Godhead. Now, why is he saying this? Because in fact, it is that beautiful. Because in fact, it is that addictive. Because it is that sweet. In the beginning, you may hear this and you may find yourself falling asleep. You may hear this and find yourself, let's switch to something more exciting. Oh, let me go to Netflix and watch some, fast-paced thing or whatever else. That's your mind wanting to be diverted. In the beginning, all things that are truly uplifting for the soul will appear boring for the mind. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that there are three kinds of happiness. There is happiness in the mode of goodness, and happiness in the mode of goodness is referred to that which tastes bitter in the beginning, but turns to nectar as we go along, such as things that are of spiritual nature. Then there are things that taste good in the beginning, that taste like wonderful nectar in the beginning, but turn to poison in the end, such as, let's say, drugs, such as, let's say, eating too much food, or even drinking too much, or anything else that you do in this world. The moment you start doing too much of it, it turns to poison. It starts to affect you physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then, of course, there's happiness in the mode of ignorance, which is actually not happiness at all. It is just laziness and not wanting to do anything and just being depressed and kind of out of it. 3 kinds of happiness. So one should not be disturbed by the duality of opposing elements and tolerate them. So now this is a really important point in today's time. We are raising a generation, I believe, of people who are not able to take on challenges. We're pampering our kids to such a degree, enabling them to such a degree that the moment they hear something a little unpleasant, see something a little unpleasant, they will gang up together and try to put it down. It could be someone's post, it could be someone's statements. They will find a way to put it down instead of being able to sit with opposing elements, opposing thoughts, opposing views. Oppositional views are very important to deal with because they strengthen us. They help us see things from different perspectives. They allow us to expand our mind. They allow us to not be linear and focused and looking at things in one way, but to see things in many ways. And that strengthens the mind. Also, opposing forces could be forces like heat or cold or obstacles in life, losing a job, losing a loved one. All of those are opposing elements, and one must learn to tolerate them. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that happiness and distress are like winter and summer seasons. They appear and they disappear in due course of time, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Sanat Kumar continues, by increasingly rendering devotional service and hearing the name and qualities of the Supreme Being, one will transcend material nature and be fixed in transcendence. Now watch what he's saying. How is it that by meditating on something, we go towards that thing? If we meditate on the things that we desire, let's say we see an ad on TV for a particular thing, and then we think about it, and then we'll start seeing it again, and we'll start seeing it again. And gradually, as we let it stay in our consciousness, we will want to have that thing. In much the same way as we begin to meditate on the divine, and meditation cannot always be done by sitting in a passive way, but rather by rendering service, by doing things such as serving others, such as cooking something for the divine or God, such as listening to his pastimes, listening to the names and qualities. So by various activities of serving and hearing, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, by listening, by speaking about, by serving, we begin to remember God. So one will transcend material nature and be fixed in transcendence over time. See, even as you listen to these things, and even as your heart becomes purified, they will start to taste sweet and wonderful. These pastimes, these things we're talking about. And as that happens, you will find yourself uplifted from all your worries. You will transcend material nature. And for those moments while you're listening to this, or any other such thing as kirtan or chanting the names of God in any way, you will find yourself transported into another dimension, another energy, another consciousness. And gradually in time, you will find yourself living there. That will become your home. That will be where you are most of the time. From time to time, you will need to come and deal with the world. Of course you will. But you will live in that transcendent consciousness. Because that is who we are. And that is where we belong. Our soul is transcendent, and so is God. So when you're listening to things about God, your soul is in such ecstatic resonance. It is feeling that energy. It is feeling that connection. It is like, oh my God, I finally feel alive. Sanat continues, attachment to the Supreme Godhead burns up the fire of material desires, exactly as fire arising from wood burns the wood itself. What a beautiful example. Attachment to the Supreme Godhead burns up the fire of material desires, exactly as fire arising from wood burns the wood itself. Think about this. This is so powerful. See, it's not just that it's not that God wants to be glorified. Let's get that clear in our minds. God doesn't give a damn. You want to glorify, you want to hate, you want to love, you want to be indifferent. That's fine. You have total freedom. You have been given free will. Do what you want. But when you have figured out that the world does not satisfy you, when you figured out that this world is not fulfilling that empty space within you, then at that time, when you turn to God, it's not that you do so because, I just want some relief from suffering. Not just that. It's not just that. It's that you purify the very thing that was causing you to suffer. Buddha said it that desire is the root cause of suffering, according to him. I think it's a lot more than that, but yeah. Okay, let's take his idea. But here, it's talking about how attachment to the Supreme Godhead burns up the fire of material desire. Burns it up. Like, how else would you get rid of material desire? Right? Only by being totally purified. He says, exactly as fire arising from wood. So remember, the fire was in the wood. You couldn't see it. It was dormant. Then it got ignited, right? And as our soul gets ignited by hearing about the Supreme Being, Krishna, then the fire that arises within us burns off the material desire and the attraction to this world. We will still continue to be in the world. We will still continue to enjoy the world, but we'll no longer be attached to it. We will no longer look to it for our satisfaction because we know it cannot satisfy us. Just as much as sugar cannot satisfy us, we need something nutritional. We need something satisfying, something that truly fills us and nourishes us. And that is what we're talking about here. Sanath continues, at that time the difference between the eternal soul and the supersoul, or God who is seated in everyone. So the Vedas say God is present in everything, in the energy of the universe, is present in everyone. So is present everywhere, is present in everyone, and yet exists outside this universe in the spiritual world as a being and as an energy, the light, and Krishna as a being. So he says here that at that time, the difference between the soul and the supersoul, inside us are both the soul and the supersoul, the Paramatma, the great soul, is also present within us. God is present within us. The soul is there, that is the individuated self, yourself and me. We're all tiny, infinitesimal particles of the divine. We are of that same quality, but not quantity. We are qualitatively one with God, but quantitatively we are infinitesimal, smaller than even the atom. So that soul resides within here along with the supersoul, the Paramatma, the presence of God within us, which was existing even before self-realization. But now the difference between the two is gone. We recognize that we are, as such, one with and different from God. That's the beauty of the relationship. We're no longer feeling that sense of separation. We're no longer feeling that sense of emptiness. We're no longer feeling that sense of aloneness that we feel when we are by ourselves. Now, even if you are by yourself, you know you're home, right here, where you are. The difference between the soul and the supersoul, which was existing before self-realization, is annihilated. When a dream is over, there is no longer a distinction between the dream and the dreamer. When the dream is over, there is no longer a distinction between the dream and the dreamer. When one's mind and senses are attracted to sense objects for enjoyment, the mind becomes agitated. As a result of continually thinking of sense objects, one's real consciousness almost becomes lost, meaning one's spiritual consciousness becomes lost. Like the water in a lake that is gradually sucked up by the big grass straws on its bank. When one deviates from his original consciousness, he loses the capacity to remember his previous position or recognize his present one. In other words, we are now captivated by the mind and the senses, and we no longer can see who we really are and nor can we see what happened to us or where we went. We are just carried away, like as if you're carried away by a strong current on a river or a tsunami. When remembrance is lost, all knowledge acquired is based on a false foundation. So the knowledge that we are acquiring in this world, this knowledge of all this stuff that we are now accumulating through all the internet and everything else, is based on a false foundation. When this occurs, learned scholars consider that the soul is lost. You see, all of this material advancement, and now all this technological advancement, and now all this knowledge advancement is leaving us lost. Gradually, the machines become more powerful than us. Gradually, the AI, the robots, the whatever else, are the ones who will control this world. And the only way out is for us to recognize a power that we have that no machine can have, something that differentiates us from all of this machine learning and all of this artificial intelligence. And that power is the power of the soul. That soul cannot be replicated by any machine. I challenge anyone forever and eternally. There is no possibility. People think consciousness can be replicated, and all they're talking about is the mind. All they're talking about is the ego, the sense of who you think you are. That can be replicated, yes. That can be cloned, yes. But this consciousness of the soul cannot be. And that it takes a longer discussion to get into that. Be happy to do it if anyone's interested in discussing. In this condition, he says, one sees a difference between himself and others. So when you are lost in the world, when you are lost in your mind, when you are attracted to sense objects for enjoyment and the mind becomes agitated in that state, now what happens is you see a difference between yourself and others. Just as one sees reflections of a body appearing differently manifested on water, on oil, or in a mirror. So you see, we see others as different than us. We see them according to their body. We see them according to their gender. We see them according to their race. We see them according to their wealth, according to their age. But the reality is that what lies in them lies in us. And when we insult them, we insult us. And when we hate them, we hate us. And when we look down on them, we look down on us. There's no getting away from it. That which you hate lies within you. The evil you see, the ugliness you see, the things you criticize, all lie within you, because who's the one seeing? You are. The ugliness is not out there. The ugliness is in here. Sanat continues, there is no stronger obstruction to one's self-interest than thinking other subject matters to be more pleasing than one's self-realization. For human society, constantly thinking of how to earn money and apply it for sense gratification brings about the destruction of everyone's interests. When one becomes devoid of knowledge and devotional service to God, he enters into species of life like those of trees and stones. So in other words, our consciousness in this world is degrading. We think we are evolving through science and technology, but in fact our consciousness is degrading because we're constantly thinking about external things and how to use them for enjoyment of our senses and how to have more power and control over the world and over others. But all of that is destroying everyone's interest. As you will see, it is destroying the planet. It is destroying nature. It is destroying everything. And ultimately it will destroy us. Our selfishness, our greed will ultimately come to destroy us. We need to wake up. And that is why we do these talks, so that as many of you may learn and grow and wake up. Sanat says, those who strongly desire to cross the ocean of nescience means darkness, ignorance. Those who wish to desire to cross the ocean of nescience must not associate with the modes of ignorance, for hedonistic activities are the greatest obstruction to realization of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So what he's saying is that the desire to enjoy the world, or hedonism, is the greatest obstruction to even the realization of dharma, even your economic development, even regulated sense enjoyment, and even liberation. How is it? Because when you go into unrestricted sense enjoyment, that is to say, anything goes, you're willing to play at any level, enjoy at any level, eat, drink, and be merry. That was what caused the Roman Empire to actually fall down. And it will cause this empire to fall down as well, because we need to regulate our senses. Why do we regulate our senses? Because as you regulate the senses, then you are able to also regulate the mind. And as you train it, as you train the mind, and as you train the senses to be focused on that which is the ultimate goal of life, then you're able to advance society towards a higher purpose and a higher goal. Otherwise, we're simply here pretty much being like animals. Eat, drink, and be merry. And hey, you're absolutely entitled to do that. There is nothing wrong there. We will face the consequence of that. The world may go wherever it goes. We may exist or not exist. That's fine. But no one's going to guilt trip you over it. If that's what you want, go for it. But if what you want is to really understand the meaning of life and to attain the highest levels possible of human development, of spiritual development, then this is the path being offered to you. These are the words of a highly evolved being who is trying to wake us up and show us that, hey, we need to take charge of our lives. We need to do something more than we've been doing, far more than we've been doing. We need to get our act together. Sanat continues, out of the four principles, namely dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, liberation, I've explained those earlier, so I won't speak of them again. Liberation has to be taken very seriously. So the last one, moksha, has to be taken very seriously. The other three are subject to destruction by the stringent law of nature or death. So dharma may be, your duties, your way of living your life, your responsibilities. Those will end with death. Artha, your wealth, that will also end with death. Kama, your sense enjoyment, that too will end with death. But moksha, the final one of those four, will always be there. That is what has to be taken seriously. That is the most important. Dear King Prithu, try to understand the Supreme Godhead who is living within everyone's heart, along with the individual soul in each and every body, either moving or not moving. He is eternally transcendental to the material creation and all material contamination, transcendental to the material creation and all material contamination. Unto him only must one surrender. For the most part, I find people are surrendered to their mind. They're surrendered to their thoughts. They're surrendered to their emotions. They're surrendered to their needs. They're surrendered to their pleasure. They're surrendered to their political parties. They're surrendered to their country. They're surrendered to all these things. They identify with them. They become one with them. And as a result of which, they're never able to transcend this world. They're never able to see things as they are. They're always caught, trapped, like in a cage. But the Supreme Being is transcendental to material creation and all material contamination. So when we come in touch with the divine, the symptom is that we also experience that sense of elevation, that sense of being uplifted from our mind and from this world. And then we know we're on the right track. He continues, the ocean of nescience is very difficult to cross because it is infested with many dangerous sharks. So as I told you, nescience means darkness or ignorance. The ocean of nescience, that is this world, the material world, is very difficult to cross because it is infested with many dangerous sharks. Although those who are non-devotees or non-believers undergo severe austerities and penances to cross that ocean, we recommend that you simply take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Being. Although the ocean is difficult to cross, by taking shelter of his lotus feet, you will overcome all dangers. So this conversation also takes place in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna talks to Arjuna about which is the best way to go. I will help you. I will make sure that you can cross over the ocean of birth and death, and that nothing can stop you. Being enlightened in spiritual knowledge, King Prithu worshipped the sons of Brahma. He then offered them everything he had: his life, his wife, his children, his home, his furniture, and household paraphernalia, kingdom, strength, land, and treasury. Everything. He offered everything he had to them. He said, "This is all yours." And they were not interested. For their unlimited service to enlighten everyone everywhere, the king could find no way to repay them except to fold his palms and surrender to them. The Kumars praised the character of the king, and because his only aim in all his activities was to satisfy the absolute truth. The fruits of all his activities were dedicated to God, and he always thought of himself as the servant of the supreme Godhead, who is the proprietor of everything. King Prithu was very wealthy due to the prosperity of his empire, yet he was never inclined to utilize his opulences for the gratification of his senses. He remained unattached, exactly like the sun, which is unaffected in all circumstances. King Prithu was so strong and powerful that no one could disobey his orders any more than one could conquer fire itself. He was so strong he was compared to Indra, the king of heaven, whose power is insuperable. On the other hand, he was also as tolerant as the earth. Just as rainfall satisfies everyone's desires, King Prithu satisfied everyone. He pleased the citizens in all respects by his words, works, and gentle behavior. He was like the sea in that no one could understand his depths. His reputation and glory spread throughout the universe. So now this King Prithu, after some time, became old, as all of us do. And when he did, he divided whatever opulences he had accumulated amongst everyone, meaning the people in general. He arranged pensions for his subjects, and leaving the kingdom to his sons, he went to the forest alone to perform austerities along with his wife Archi. Now this is a practice that was there with kings at that time. They didn't just live in their palaces and wait, stay there till the end of their days. No, by the time they got a little bit old, they decided, leave everything behind and go and meditate and focus on God. The citizens were heartbroken and lamenting. The king and his wife lived in the forest, at times eating the trunk and roots of trees, at times eating fruits and dried leaves, at times only drinking water, and finally only breathing air. Imagine being a king and then going to the forest to live like this, not with any servants, not with any armies, not with anything, not just the clothes on your back. That's it. They would sleep on the floor and be exposed to all the elements in winter, summer, and the rainy season. They learned to control their senses and words, as well as the prana or life air within the body. By practicing breathing exercises, they became steadfast in their love and devotion for God. Thus they became free from the clutches of false ego and the material conception of life. Gradually they gave up all forms of yoga and jnana or knowledge, and realized that devotional service to Krishna is the ultimate goal of life. When it was time to give up his body, the king fixed his mind firmly upon the lotus feet of Krishna and joyfully gave up the material body. So much to learn here from the way these great souls lived their lives and then ended their lives completely devoted to God and completely in their state of meditation. Now the Queen Archi, the wife of King Prithu, had voluntarily followed her husband to live in the forest like the great sages. Although her body was very delicate, and although she was not accustomed to such difficulties, she lay on the ground and ate only fruits, flowers, and leaves, and became frail and thin. Yet because of the pleasure she derived in serving her husband, and in the practices that they did together, she did not feel any difficulty. When his body no longer showed symptoms of life, she lamented for a little while, and then built a fiery pyre on top of a hill and placed the body of her husband on it. After performing the necessary rituals, she bathed in the river, offered prayers, circumambulated the fire, and entered its flames. Together they attained liberation and entered the kingdom of God, Vaikuntha. You may wonder, what the hell just happened here? But the fact of the matter is, when you do this kind of yogic practice, literally nothing affects you. If you are you're not even eating, you're able to generate heat. You can sit in the snow. I've recently come across people in Tibet who practice this, sitting in the snow with just a underwear on, and breathing in such a way that the cold is not able, they're generating so much of heat within the body that even the snow cannot affect them. They sit there all night, and there are other yogis who sit for weeks and months, and literally the snow starts to melt under them, and if they put a damp cloth on top of them, the cloth becomes dry. So powerful is the power of their meditation and their breathing and the yogic work that they're doing. And similarly, it was for Prithu and his wife Archie. So when she entered the fire, it's not like you and me entering the fire. I'm sorry. It's not the same thing. These are highly advanced yogis. And for them at that moment, there is no connection with the body. There is just absolute being fixed in transcendence. Hearing of the narrations of King Prithu is so auspicious that it drives away all bad luck. Anyone who respectfully hears these narrations will excel in their career. If childless, one will become the parent of many children. If without money, one will become the richest. One who hears this narration 3 times will become very reputable, if not recognized in society. A great scholar, if illiterate. In other words, one will become great and increase his duration of life and counteract the contamination of the age of Kali, the time that we live in. These narrations will enrich one's devotional attitude, increase unflinching faith and attraction to the lotus feet of the Supreme Godhead, which are the boat by which one can cross the ocean of nescience. So with that, we'll end today's Bhagavatam, and I call on any of you that have any questions to please feel free to ask. Let's see what we've got. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Unfortunately, our stream to YouTube cut off in the middle, and I don't know what happened there. And then it reconnected back. But that was a bit tragic. So there may have been questions from our YouTube listeners, and I hope you've reconnected, and I hope you can ask your questions all over again, because all of that got lost in the process. I wasn't seeing the questions at the time. I don't know what in the world just happened. But how about our Zoom listeners? Anybody there have any questions? Anyone at all? You going to make it easy for me? We had some tough stuff in here. We had some definitely challenging things. You want to put it in the chat? You want to come up in person? You'd like to speak? You can just speak. I'll put you on the screen and you can speak. Just raise your hand if you'd like to say something. All right then. Last chance. You don't have to have the perfect questions. You can have anything at all. It's perfectly okay. You might have a question about your own life. That's fine too. All right. If there's nothing, then I will see you next week. Hare Krishna.